The big time stuff that I wish I had. The big time stuff that'll make you mad. The big time stuff. I like the big time stuff. I like the big time stuff that I never had.
Welcome to today's Market Meditations with Chris Haydel and Neal Mody, where we feel it is our job and our duty to be better humans. And hopefully that will lead to better investing at the same time. Some of that's just having fun. So if you have questions or comments and you want to ask us anything, please do send a note to chad@zoiccapital.com and he'll make sure we address it for the next episode. On today's podcast, we are going to have Vivienne Ming, famed computational neuroscientist. She describes herself, I think, as like a Q-list celebrity. She's probably one of the top 10 data scientists literally in the United States or the world. It's hard to measure such abstract things, but she's phenomenal. And big governments and big companies alike try and hire her to solve major problems, and she typically is able to do that. We're hoping to cover how to use AI for better living right now, a little bit of the jobs market with her. She's done more recent research on that, and some of the insights she may have around COVID-19. We're also going to play a little of the predictions game, and we will end today with learning a little bit about Chris's reflections on the week in the market, and also any advice he may have for his current clients, which is somebody we really appreciate. We wouldn't be here without you. Vivienne, we were hoping to cover 3 easy topics with you, and we know you've got limited time now since we couldn't get this working. We kind of figured it'd be, 10 minutes or under a piece, but we wanted to start to get to think about the world differently. And I know when we talk to you or when I talk to you, that happens. So I'll give them all to you, and we can take them in whatever order you want to. You're probably seeing insights into COVID-19 that the rest of us are not, because you see insights the rest of the world doesn't. We're curious about the jobs market and whether you've done any more of your recent research, since you play a labor economist by night. And AI for better living right now. If we could go through any one of those topics you want to start with. Would love to hear what you have to say.
I'm happy to get into any of them. You are about to discover why people do not like having me in radio interviews. I don't give short answers to anything, but
we have the same affliction.
Let me know whether I should not go blue or not at any given point, but I'm happy to dive in. Trust me, I've had a lot of people call me about COVID. And we actually wrote up a whole piece about it, both the economics of it and the health side from a data perspective. To be clear, I'm not an epidemiologist. I study brains, but we've had a lot of work around that. And we're doing a bunch of jobs work right now because we're all stuck at home. It is the beauty and the curse of what I do. What my team does is that we can do it from anywhere. I'm happy to go through it, any and all.
Yeah, let's start with COVID-19 then. Well, what insights are you seeing that other people are not?
Well, I think we're all coming to certain realities. The thing that frustrated me the most, right from day one, is seeing all of this discussion and reporting with what for me was crucial missing variables, most particularly denominators. How many people have actually been exposed? What are the exposure rates? You had all these differing stories, reportings on fatality rates, on increases in, exposures, infections, when in reality, boy, if you look at the correlation between the increase in COVID and the increase in testing, they track each other almost perfectly, which isn't to say COVID isn't a serious threat. It isn't to say there aren't genuinely many people sick with COVID. Not, what the testing is you've been exposed to this novel coronavirus, but COVID being the disease, it is a serious threat. But you can't make good decisions if you don't actually understand what's going on with the data. And initially, we were trapped in this world where people were making like global level decisions with terrible data. And of course, you got to do something. But I was rather shocked. My sister used to be a really highly trained critical care nurse. And I think I somewhat flippantly once said to her, not intending anything behind it, that, nurses and doctors kind of largely do the same jobs, just doctors are there for the more specialized stuff, and nurses, are just more plentiful. And she said, no, we have completely different jobs. The doctors are there to cure you. The nurses are there to keep you alive through the cure. And my feeling about our initial response to COVID, very quickly as it built up, was it was all doctors and no nurses. Not enough people were thinking, how are we as a global, and I don't mean economy in a dollars and cents term, but as a global civilization and society, how are we going to come out the other end of this? Because one of the things that our data shows many other people is, if you are a young person right now, young adult, and you have lost work, which, puts you along with what is essentially now about 18 million other Americans. And that is people applying for unemployment. How many people have just left the labor market? Well, those people, if this sustains, and many of them will not get rehired right away, if this sustains, what does research say about the last big moment of job loss, which was not the Great Recession? It was actually the 81-82 recession. Hit the US and the UK really hard. People who lost their jobs during that period, their mortality rate over the next 20 years increased by 8 percentage points. Their job prospects, their lifetime income, even 10, 20 years later, was substantially behind people matched who went into the job market just before or just after. And even people in their middle age that were entering the labor market at that time, they end up affecting all sorts of things. The chance of having kids, of getting married, of getting divorced. So in other words, this isn't just heartless dollars and cents versus saving everyone. This is a serious disease on one side, something we have to take seriously, and some incredibly serious consequences for the cure on the other side. And I think we need a lot more nurses saying, listen, the grown-up problem here, not this idealized choose one or the other, open up the economy and let old people die, or shut it all down and save all the old people at the cost of young people's jobs. Instead, how do we have the moral leadership to say, this is a complex problem, and I'm going to stand up and be counted as saying, here are the hard trade-offs we need to make, because we're going to be forced to make them no matter what. We might as well at least have the courage to make them with some intentionality. But, this is how I'm seeing this problem, and it started off with nothing but bad data. And needless to say, that really frustrated me.
Andrew, so go ahead, Chris.
Oh, I was going to say, Vivienne, this is always a challenge in the social sciences because human beings are not as accommodating as nature in giving us good quality data. They're quarrelsome and and reluctant and all the other things. And even in embodying those biases in the methods and the results and the interpretation of results is a challenge. Is there a way that AI and some of the big data can help us clean that up a bit?
And in fact, some of that work is taking place. But let's be clear, some of this are challenges between different established ways of collecting data even. And there was a good point well made here. if you were putting out tests for the coronavirus, you really want to go out, you replicate the RNA, all the complicated testing behind this. If you were doing it for health purposes, you test people that are sick. You confirm whether they have it so you know how to treat them. And you reserve, because they're not enough, you reserve all of the tests for that. But if you're doing it for policy purposes, what do we do about the shutdown? Do we track the spread? All these sorts of things. You need to go out and do sample testing. You need to pick people at random and sample whether they've actually been exposed. You could probably do it more intelligently if you use social graph analysis. I think there was a great paper that came out showing that even at an aggregated level, Facebook connectivity data predicted spread in many counties. So we could probably be smarter than just random sampling, but we have this tension. Do we follow the Hippocratic Oath and test the people that are most at risk, or do we take a more utilitarian approach and test with the idea of how do we help the most people with the biggest decision? So even a lot of the issue that, computational social science inherits from traditional social science, which is that human data is messy and people are not simply dishonest, but introspection is messy and all of this sort of stuff. Here we also have, there are genuinely differing needs at play, and those compete. And of course, nobody wants to be the one that takes tests away from sick people. So again, another tension point. One of the interesting things I think that a lot of AI and big data has done has say, hey, are there other ways that we could be doing this? That we could be thinking about, for example, how to implement social distancing, or how to explore testing itself. Even though not so much of it has panned out super well, there's actually been some interesting, genuine work looking at turning chest X-rays into insights. Can we do an X-ray from someone who has minor symptoms and predict whether they develop pneumonia, regardless of whether it's COVID or not? So UC San Diego just published a study, a controlled study. You don't see a lot of those in this moment, showing that they were actually able to do it with some real degree of accuracy. And a bit more far-fetched, but I loved it because I really enjoyed doing some audio work myself back in my dissertation days. Is actually using microphones to listen to people breathing and try and do diagnostics. And again, the point is not perfect test. If you think AI, this is always my line, if you think AI is a magic wand that will just solve all your problems for you, you failed before you even started. But if you could think about how we could go through and analyze large sets of data, not for that to be the decision, but for that to influence decisions. All right, we don't truly know who has COVID because we haven't been able to deploy the test, but we have used infrared cameras in CCTV and audio and breathing in doctors' offices and chest X-rays to at least get statistical insights into where's COVID look like it's expanding faster or slower. That is something AI and data science can truly do that is not a substitute for a doctor, but would hugely improve our understanding of the policy side of this problem.
Yeah. Fascinating. Vivienne, I even think that, I don't know, as a data scientist, if you have any insight into this, but the random testing, depending on how it's done, it seems if we had implemented that or start to, we don't need to do that much to get the error rate down under 2% or so, probably. I mean,
yeah,
it seems Massachusetts is implementing something.
I should start with a truly snooty, unnecessary comment, which is I'm not a data scientist. I'm an actual scientist. So yes, I'm a computational scientist, but Although I have to say, my PhD alma mater, Carnegie Mellon, their statistics department changed their name to data science and statistics. I think it's a lot of branding, but apparently that's the thing now. I'm still very snooty about it, though. Partially because I don't think, life isn't a Kaggle competition. It isn't, hey, I don't know anything about the problem you're trying to solve, but give me the data set and I will fix it for you. That solves nothing. So back to your actual question. One of the ways I think about the use of machine learning is to extend off my previous comment. It can't magically solve problems for you, but what it can do is if you already have a solution, it can transform the economics of that solution. You can take what is otherwise a very low bandwidth, often very expensive expert level decision and transform it into something you can essentially distribute for free through any phone that may not be the same quality as the expert, although in some domains it's even better. And as long as you understand that, that quality is different, surely you can see value in it. So then I look at South Korea and Taiwan and Singapore that essentially did brute force contact tracing and testing. And even though, they had data to work with, particularly in Singapore, but they weren't leveraging machine learning. And we're a vastly bigger country than any of those. But imagine you could take that same approach to data, but instead of doing what many of them did, which is literally just put armies of people out there to work night and day and trace everything down, you could do this very efficiently by leveraging machine learning driven contact tracing, which is part of the system that Apple and Google, amazingly enough, are jointly trying to develop. I'm thrilled that they don't collaborate on anything, but they are collaborating on this.
And they put their
I've even
knives
done
away,
work. Yes, I'm sure that they're there somewhere. They're just waiting for the chance. The scorpion can't help but sting the frog. I don't know who is the
Yes.
scorpion in this case, but it's probably a bullfrog, and it's going to eat the scorpion at the same time as the scorpion stings it. Nonetheless, they're doing this, and actually I've done contact tracing, totally different domain. We were looking at trying to explore how real-time, real-life social graphs emerge. And so you use these technologies that allow Bluetooth phones to ping each other whenever people are close. When people are together, for how long. We even turn on microphones so we can hear snippets of them talking. It's really powerful. We've used it with kids. We've used it with adults for totally different work. But here, obviously, the idea is someone gets a diagnosis in whatever way. Obviously, you want to wait till you get a real confirmation here, but someone gets a diagnosis. And if you, just like that, snap your fingers, you knew everyone they were in contact with, or even just a good percentage of those people, suddenly you could go back, you could aggressively test them. You wouldn't have to just spread those tests out in completely random ways. You could be very, very targeted. And another piece of research that was published recently that actually, it touches on data and what we can do with it, actually looked at the spread of disease in places like West Africa and found that if you wanted to cut off things, just generically an intervention. For us, intervention right now is stay home. But of course, interventions could be vaccinations, they could be hand washing, whatever an intervention is. If you could target individuals with an intervention, who should you target? Traditionally, we target healthcare givers, sort of important people, teachers, these sorts, because it seems like they come in contact with a lot of people. But actually, this research found it was more effective just picking people at random. If you pick the exact same number of people, but you grabbed them at random out of a social network, so they were intentionally spread around throughout social networks, it actually slowed the spread of diseases, decreased the R naught better than targeting these supposedly high contact people. But I bet we could do better than that, because remember, I just mentioned that data from Facebook was predictive of the spread of coronavirus. Well, what if we could marry those two together and we could pair together that social network data and then go in and say, listen, you're an amazing person. Everybody's your friend, but that also means you have the potential to be a super spreader. So we're going to pay you to enact a bunch of very specific interventions. And the better you do, the more we'll pay you. I don't mean to make everything money, but obviously you want to get people to comply with these sorts of things. And I bet we could do something like that, and we'd see much lower R naughts, or at least comparable to what we're getting right now, without shutting everything down. But again, big challenges. The health side has dominated this. I've said it's all about the doctors, not about the nurses. But then the privacy side comes in, and where East Asia can go out and do the contact tracing here in the States. By the way, they've done a decent job in Northern Europe as well. But here in the States, in the UK, wow, they do not have the same power to just wave a wand and say, listen, we need to know everyone you've been around. So again, conflicting policy needs. And essentially, the way we've defaulted is you just pick one need and you go all in on it. And that is not actual moral leadership. That's a kind of cowardice.
Very fascinating.
Yeah. Vivienne, thank you for that.
Sure.
Looking at the numbers from Massachusetts, where they believe that random testing of about 35,000 or so people would give them good results. That's a population of 7 million. And they said that random testing, I'm not sure they would apply any of the thoughtfulness you've done, but it would give them an error rate of plus or minus 1.5%, they thought, in the testing. And if we extrapolated that out to the size of the U.S. and we did some even similar random testing, it suggests we'd only need 250,000 or so tests to get an idea. It
gives you a sense, but you have to be willing to sort of own the idea that you are in control of that process. I guess my read on this is that there's a lot of affiliation going on right here. I am part of the group that cares about people's lives. I am part of the group that cares about the economy. I am the part of the group that cares about privacy, and not a lot of people coming in and saying, well, where will we all be 10 years from now, 20 years from now? How do we get the best outcome for as many people as possible over that time? And, it feels like an unanswerable question, but it's not. It's unanswerable from a crystal ball perspective, but it just means when we make these decisions, as imperfect as we will be in making them and as uncertain as the data is, we can still say, I honestly believe here are the points of balance against these interests, and here's how we will move forward. And again, unfortunately, I'm not seeing a lot of that, and I think you're right. If we had the courage to sort of pull out some tests and really go out and sample, there's been some interesting results showing that there's a real consistency in the few cases where we've done a lot of random sampling, finding about a 20%, 1 in 5 exposure rate. And of course, most of those people don't have substantial symptoms. I actually kind of suspect I've been exposed already.
You travel. It would make sense.
I flew up to MIT when everything was getting shut down. There was a shelter-at-home order here in the Bay Area. Boston had its outbreak from Biogen, and so I flew up there, and it was like some weird post-apocalyptic thing. The weird thing is there were actually still a fair number of people at the airport. It was quiet, but I thought I might be the only person on a plane. So I flew out there and I did some work that I considered to be important at the time, and flew back. And had some weird rashes, which is an uncommon, but it's a symptomology that's popped up from a couple of people, and so I'm just suspicious. But I'm not going to get tested because I'm fine. My family's fine. And plus, we all can do our jobs from home. So we're just not under pressure. Testing someone like me is purely a policy consideration rather than a medical one. And that's just not what we're doing.
Well, no, one of the things that you said, some of it's about courage. I actually kind of don't think, we'll call them the leaders in charge, really have the grasp or mastery on looking at this the way you do. Right, I think that's part of the issue is they don't have the right people surrounding them to make good decisions. I've got to figure at least a few of them would be, though. Otherwise,
I think right now, and I'm not saying this purely to pick on Trump, but anyone listening to this can probably guess my political persuasion. But
we're okay with that. You be you.
Yeah. I mean, I can say bad things about him, and that's my genuine feeling. But also, I do a lot of research around organizations, understanding communities, and the good and bad of it. Like, there's again, just like everything else, everything is tension. A system that's not in tension is probably an unhealthy system. One of those tensions, for example, is between sociologists call it tightness and looseness. Tighter societies have lower crime, people, they're less inequality. Looser societies have more innovation. And, those are all desirable things. And I don't know that there's a fundamental trade-off to them, but boy, at a societal level in the data, there is a trade-off. And this is as true of countries and regions as it is as companies. So we get to do all this fun research, and now I'm going to look.
So tie it back to Trump, right? You were about to try and tie this.
Yeah, but that was exactly what I was about to do, which is I looked particularly at things surrounding COVID, and we can draw on more than that, but particularly here, and we have interesting evidence trails, like if you've seen them, the Red Dawn emails, all of these. CDC and other health specialists sending, many of them inside the administration, sending emails back and forth to one another, clearly, like in January, beside themselves about where this might go. So the idea that people inside the administration didn't know, well, I could believe Trump didn't know, but that's what I'm getting to is one of the things I go and talk to companies about is, hey, you want to build a truly healthy culture that can innovate, then people need to be able to speak truth to power. If people are too scared to say what they truly think, then it doesn't matter how creative they are. All they're going to try and do is guess what the leaders want to hear and tell it to them. Well, this is like definitionally what the Trump administration is. We have a whole bunch of people, even how little I think of the administration, these are still a lot of highly talented, many of them, not all of them are smart, but enough of them are that someone should have been able to do something. But then you read those emails and you see no one wants to tell the truth because they're afraid of saying something that Trump will dislike and getting fired. And the way I talk about
that's
this
not a healthy
culture,
is it?
That is not a healthy culture at all. And let's be clear, many organizations work that way.
Yeah, I have good news. We're not alone. I guess not good news, but it seems that the virus is, of course, exposed fragility in all of these, in the corporate body, these organizations you're talking about, both China, here, Brazil, all of the very autocratic regimes are suffering. Iran, from the bottleneck of information flow that this creates.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting to note, for example, a place that famously can be kind of autocratic on a certain level is Singapore, but they were able to find a trade-off between being honest with themselves and laying down the law, if you will. And South Korea is a very communalist society as opposed to individualist. And yet, again, there was a recognition that they needed to be honest about what was going on. What's interesting is I think what ties together, and I like, using the term autocratic, what ties together the states that showed the most fragility or continue to right now, and those that have adapted the best, is probably a composition of trust in institutions. So one thing is the societies that have done the best have the most institutional trust. And that seems to be a really solid indicator here. But the other is not simply the degree of centralized control, but the degree to which that control is essentially centered around a bit of an ego. And I think there's a real correlation here. These people rise to power because there is a lack of institutional trust. You combine uncertainty, such as economic uncertainty over the last couple of decades, with a fracturing of social lines and a decrease in institutional trust. And that's exactly when people start to vote for demagogues and autocrats. They just want someone to tell everyone else how it's going to be, because, of course, you're right. And so here's the person that's going to lay it on the wall. And it doesn't matter if they're a horrible person that grabs people in inappropriate places, or thinks that orange is the color that skin should be. It just, it boils down to right now, it is my tribe that I care about. And it's just not possible. I don't know. I haven't seen evidence yet, either in research or in this instance, that societies that are fractured along those lines can deal with a global problem like this. I mean, hell, you have Trump tweeting out right now that, what was it, Virginians, Minnesotans, and someone else telling them to resist their governments. That's his government. But of course, he doesn't see it that way. And the people that he's truly trying to signal against here don't see it that way. They don't have trust in their local governments. They, strangely enough, probably don't have trust in the federal government. Somehow they magically see the person leading that government as separate from the institution that he leads. And so now we've collapsed, and we have no ability to deal with a systemic shock like this, or an economic shock, or any of it. I mean, let's be clear, on the economic side, I run what amounts to a philanthropy. So I fund it out of my own work, but we operate like a small business. And needless to say, a lot of where that money came from was me traveling around the world giving talks. So that's all gone. Now, I am in an astonishingly good position compared to the majority of people in the world. I've made a commitment to my employees to not lay anyone off, and we're going to get through this. But along the way, all right, let's look at the CARES Act and all the money they set aside. Well, they didn't. I think the statistic I just saw today was 5% of companies got 50% of that money. Chris Steakhouse got $10 million in that funding. Yeah. Now, you could argue that they're a restaurant and the whole point is let's keep those food service employees employed, but let's
they're not
also
that top
be blunt.
Priority. Yeah, they're not. They should be a top priority.
Yeah, they could get out there and float a bond or take a loan. They're not going to go bankrupt and disappear. There will be those steakhouses around. Whereas the true local businesses, they don't have any other recourse. Without this support, they're gone. And then the capacity of a local community to support itself, to feed itself, is gone. And that may sound small, but that's one of my biggest fears here is that so many of small and medium-sized businesses simply cease to exist. You might think she sounds pretty liberal or progressive here. She probably thinks
no, I think we probably agree with that. We actually both probably agree with that.
Yeah, but I'm all in. We shouldn't just pump money directly into people's bank accounts. We should keep them employed so that we have that community capacity to do more than just feed ourselves, have money in our accounts to go to the store, but we do work that is meaningful to us. And if you got nothing to do, I saw this, I won't shame them, so I won't name them, but big giant hotel chain complained about the bailout money. I don't even remember, but so we can imagine who they are. I'm sure all of them feel the same, which is they got this big chunk of bailout specifically for them, and they're complaining because it has to be spent on employees. And they're saying that's not our issue right now. Like, there's no one staying in our hotels. We don't need the employees. We're laying them all off or furloughing them or something. And my response to that is, again, I'm a business leader. I understand what you're saying, but here's what I'm hearing as a researcher. You think so little of human capital that even if the federal government paid for your entire workforce to go out and do something, you can't think of anything for them to do? That is shocking to me. Pay them to go take classes. Pay them to go on Coursera and learn how to do something. I get it. Maybe they won't do anything, for your bottom line, but suddenly you'll have better human capacity. And if that means they actually leave you and go to a better job, be proud of that. What an amazing thing to take someone from folding sheets at a Hyatt to having this as the moment. And we got a bunch of broken bridges that we're calling the U.S. workforce. And we pay lip service to actually fixing the real infrastructure of this country, and we should. How about we take this moment to make the same investment in the human capital infrastructure? People can't do anything else. They can learn. Everyone can learn. We should pay them to do so.
Wow, thank you, Vivienne. I agree with that. There's no question that the CARES Act was rushed as it was, and also as haphazard as the outcome would be assumed to be. It surely was. I mean, the disproportionate way that corporations are benefiting, again, at the expense of real human capital, is a travesty. There's so many ways it could have been rewritten. It should have just been flipped. But
and of course, the funny thing is, that this will increase that distrust of institutions, which will then drive people to support the very kind of fracturing which caused the policy to be so ineffective. It is an invirtuous cycle that probably some exploit intentionally, but I think often happens just because society gets pointed in the wrong direction. Yeah.
Vivienne, is there any other insight, just based on your research? I know we could go a lot of different ways with you, but is there any other interesting insight you're seeing that you think others aren't about the jobs market? You shared little parts of different things, but some of the other underlying things that you're seeing that will help us be more compassionate and better investors at the same time?
You have to be clear on so many things around jobs, which is one is, as I was saying earlier, so many other life outcomes are tied into work. You take work away from people, and everything else about their lives gets worse. Yes, most Americans, most people around the world do not want to be their jobs. I actually hope for something else, which is you get the job that you want to be. But, I may be an idealist, but I'm also a realist. That's not going to happen tomorrow or anytime soon. So that's a different conversation. But recognize so much of who people are, and not just in soft ways, tangible ways, mortality rates, social connectivity, well-being. Again, one of my favorite metrics of all time, walking speed at age 65. Like these things are tied to seemingly ephemeral things like, for a few years, I was out of work at just the wrong time. As one bit of research called it, to a degree, it's just about luck. If you enter the workforce at one time or another, or if you happen to have just at the wrong moment a certain economic exposure, a loan coming due or something, and suddenly bad luck, now the rest of your life has this extra weight on top of it. You lead the rest of your life against a headwind. So understanding this is not a short-term thing. The consequences of loss of work for the apparently maybe tens of millions of people, certainly globally even more, will be devastating. Then also understand that it is not equally distributed. So people like me, people highly paid, highly educated, tech industry, we do work and we do it with a kind of background that allows us to really adapt to a circumstance like this. Yes, ad revenue for Facebook and Google will decline, and so probably Facebook and Google will do some belt tightening, but largely people are still online. They're still using their products. They need to get connected. And so if you had a job like that, you're in pretty good shape. Whereas if you didn't have a college degree, if you were working in particular kinds of industries that demand more on-site, manufacturing or energy, then it is very likely that this will be particularly devastating. And let's also point out one other thing, which is, yes, it is possible for young people to experience COVID-19. And there are genuinely meaningfully large populations of the elderly that are economically exposed. But again, this has been researched before. The overwhelming sort of threat profile here is largely disjoint. The health response is about saving lives of the elderly. The economic response is about saving the future lives of the young. So one thing is disproportionately helping the older, wealthier population. Another thing is disproportionately helping or affecting a younger, less affluent population. So either way is a sacrifice. It is interesting that part of the challenge here is we're making a choice in which disjoint groups, these two different populations, not exclusively, but largely these two different populations, are choosing to make a sacrifice for one another. And I think that's kind of fascinating from a political perspective, from a sociological perspective, but it would be awkward if we go back to my doctor's analogy, if we're all about saving lives, because now we're asking this one group to take all of the sacrifice for a completely different group. And of course, it was all about saving jobs. Then we go, as some politicians that are definitely not of my stripe have called for, then it flips all the way back around. And they've said that, hey, I think grandma and grandpa would be willing to roll the dice in exchange for keeping their kids in the black. All right, so where do we find some recognition that we're in it together? And there's a balance, because we cannot keep up the lockdown forever. There doesn't matter what an epidemiological model says is the optimal time to stop. We will have to stop at some point, or at least change how it gets applied. And we need to make plans for that right now, rather than, all right, the model says we stay like this, so we stay like this no matter what it does to the rest of the economy. Or the model, what I'm kind of expecting is, the model says we stay like this, so we stay like this until that day comes, and then someone realizes, oh shit, what do we do next? And I bet a lot of people are thinking about what to do next, but I don't think the decision makers are thinking what to do next. I don't think they're preparing themselves for this decision. So the jobs thing is big and it's complex, and it's more than just a story of money versus lives, because it's all lives in the end.
I don't even know where to start to react, and just to say I really appreciate your perspective.
Yeah, that was beautifully stated. I agree.
Thanks.
You said humanity.
Well, I also, you said, what should we think as investors? I don't, as you well know, Neil, I don't personally directly invest in things, but I actually invest by donating
by time,
research.
Or by time.
Exactly.
You invest by time.
So I sit on a number of boards, or I'm the chief science advisor for groups because I believe in what they're trying to do. And so I donate my and Socos Labs time to try and help them. And the number one thing that I tell a lot of groups is I get it. I know what it's like staring at a runway and knowing that, God, we planned for 6 months, and who the hell is going to be doing, Series C investing before summer? I guess one question is, are VCs going to take their summer holiday or not? Because have you actually been out doing investing?
They should be fearful.
I hope so.
They should be fearful about taking that vacation.
Mm-hmm.
So let's stay in the game and actually keep looking at that, because people are going to need it, and they're not going to be able to wait for fall for your traditional pitch
cycle
season.
Times. Yeah.
But at the same time, I think some genuine understanding here, and I get the rock and a hard place, like what are your limited partners? Think about how you're deploying your dollars, but still, there is something also about preserving the capacity. You thought these were good companies in the first place, and I know there's a degree of, I've seen some VC firms say this, hey, you're going to, basically our firms are all going to go under. We're going to give a little pre-investment. If you go under our umbrella, we'll stake you $50K for your next startup. I'm like, but then you lose all that capacity. I know most startups fail. They do. That's just the way it is. But essentially, I think a lot of people have talked about hitting the sort of time stop button and just let it run for a little while. I don't know. I'm not quite certain what I'm calling for VCs to do, but I hope that they're investing with some heart, and they have the courage to stand up to their limited partners and say, listen, these were good bets, and it's not their fault that this happened. We don't think we should walk away from them and just let them go under, because they've built capacity. And when this is done, we're going to need these startups to do their job. In fact, when this is done, a lot of companies will be out of business. I mean, a huge number. And that capacity will be lost if we don't support, and that means dollars support, our existing portfolio. They will be amongst those that disappear. If we do support them, then suddenly, God, I'm making up numbers here, but half of their market space will be cleared out. Isn't that the dream? Like, I hate to put it so crassly, but how many times have you thought, boy, we could have been successful if we could just had enough room for people to see us and get attention.
Right.
Boy, no one would have ever wanted it to be this, but it's an opportunity. And maybe you pick your battles. Like, I really believe in these three founders and the teams that they put together. And I'm going to live the line that I tell everyone, which is that my founders are my friends, and I'm right there with them. So, okay, then back them up and give them whatever it is, the bridge loans or an early round, just so that they can stay afloat, because this is going to run through spring, and then the economy will be devastated probably for the rest of the year. And they got to get through that all. That's the runway you're looking at, no matter how good your team is. So if you believe in them, stick with them through all that.
Thank you, Vivienne. I think we're probably way past your time, so we appreciate your time joining us today, Vivienne.
Sure. To give you a sense of what my time is, I need to, it is getting a little late. I've got, most importantly, 20 minutes to go pick up mochi muffins. This is one of the few places in my neighborhood which is still open for you can just walk up and buy mochi muffins, and my kids have become addicted. Even worse, they have mochi buttered donuts.
Oh God!
Wow.
Yeah, they're so good. There's a reason they're still open. And then I got
That's essential. That is essential.
Yeah, this is clearly not about being alive. This is about life being worth living. Mochi butter donuts, black sesame, matcha. I really like
next time I come visit you,
coconut.
Next time I'm in Berkeley, we're gonna go to this place.
I'll even do a plug. Third Culture Bakery is the place. So if you ever want to order some mochi donuts and mochi muffins, they're pretty awesome.
In Berkeley, California.
But then I have to actually, in Berkeley, California. And the other thing is, I'm actually at my office right now with my family. I'm looking down from my second floor office at my wife, who's running her virtual meeting. My daughter is immediately next door to me doing her art class, and my son is in the office below me doing his class. We go into my office every day. They put on their school uniforms. We pretend like the world is not crazy, and we all hop online and we do our jobs. Obviously, we have the good fortune and privilege of being able to do that, but the one quirk is within about 30 minutes, I need to go zip past my daughter's school and pick up some papers so that she can do her homework over the weekend. Yeah.
Well, we appreciate it very much. Go enjoy those muffins and be safe when you go to school. Be safe in general.
Vivienne, it's been great. Very enlightening. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. It's always fun being a professional pompous jackass.
Thank you.
We'll talk to you soon, Vivienne.
All right.
All right. Cheers. Bye.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Cheers. Bye, Vivienne.
Chris, it's just the two of us. I wonder if we try and make the episode a little shorter here and just spend a couple minutes on the market this week with your clients and your reflections on it and any messages you have for them.
Well, the rebound rally continues, but we haven't begun to digest just the first peek at Q1 earnings, and so we don't really have a vision of what the full effect of coronavirus is. And like in all aspects of our economy and our world, we're all flying through this fog. The Chinese economy, though, remarkably, the data came in with a negative GDP number for the first quarter. They're the most rapid, and therefore their numbers are the most questionable. But I was really pleasantly shocked to see a negative sign in front of the number they reported. So maybe trying to gain some credibility with the reporting. But it, of course, suggests that the fallout from this is great, as we all expect it to be. But the markets have rallied on the backs of the stimulus and just really a sort of hopefulness, I think. And this is normally the way things go. So I would expect some more deterioration in the market to come. In
the next 60 days? Next 90 days? I mean, without exactly
sooner. I think sooner. We're seeing it overseas. There's deterioration, and I think we have with all the high debt levels and the fear that's still in the market that's under this veneer of relief in the rally. It won't take much to stoke those fears again, and I think some of the abysmal economic numbers and job losses that are still really to be digested will probably have a pronounced and negative effect on the market. So I just really think people should keep whatever protections or hedges they have, or reduce exposure where they feel that they can't stomach wild swings. And don't be brave, run away, live to fight another day. I just mean be thoughtful. For my clients, for everyone who might be listening, again, I still say we have to be gentle with ourselves, because we're all carrying a lot of anxiety, stress, and tension, even consciously or unconsciously processing a lot of this uncertainty. And we've lived for so long with even a false certainty. You know, Tuesday usually looks like Monday, but in this environment, all of that disconnected, and so we're really feeling it and carrying it even in our bodies and in our emotions and in our thoughts. So we've got to be gentle with ourselves and with others. We're all processing a lot.
I feel like this is our heaviest episode in a long time. Even though we're talking about the craziness of COVID-19, it really is starting to infect well, maybe it already has, but maybe I'm able to see a little better. That's infected every part of our world, not just the markets or the people who are being stuck at home, but like every part of our world has been infected.
Well, you know, when we canceled sports and other diversions, a lot of entertainment is taken away. I think we tend to fill that void with a lot of news, and most of the news are counts of, you know, infected and the deceased and the serious cases, and it obscures a lot of the beauty that's in the world and the good things that are there. I mean, for me, being home with my family is very lovely most of the time. I was joking with you earlier. The dishes pile up rather quickly. I hadn't noticed that before. That's a new observation. There are more cobwebs in my house than I really thought existed. I thought we were doing a good job knocking those back, but anyway. So, but it is beautiful, and it's spring, and it's beautiful. The air is clean because of low traffic. That's a sort of unintended beauty to recognize. There's so much to see, but again, our minds are focusing on the unknowns and also the fear of the unknown. So
let's play the predictions game, just for 4 predictions to end.
Oh, in the worst possible environment to make a prediction, when
Perfect.
Tuesday definitely doesn't look like Monday.
Yeah. So percentage of startups that will fail. You set the number, I'll go over under, based on COVID-19. So if there's 20,000 in the world that are registered.
Wait, let's frame this a little better. So you're saying just in raw numbers or percentages?
In raw numbers, yeah. So percentages, yes. Raw numbers.
But I guess
if there's 20,000 registered startups, we'll call it, because lots of people are working on something that they haven't shared. So what percentage will
20,000 registered startups?
No, I don't know if there is. I actually haven't seen a number. But
what's the rate of failure normally, Neil? Just broadly.
So, like, tech VCs, ping it at, 1 in 10 of their companies will survive, and you figure something like, 1 in 1,000 have a chance to get that round A. So, the numbers in terms of, who will have successes, orders of magnitude in every round fall off.
So this is then, you're suggesting we estimate like a rate of change?
No, I'm suggesting we just say, over the next 6 months, here's the percentage of startups we expect to die. So it's hard to know because we don't have the exact number of how many startups there were worldwide in 2019. I'm sure somebody's tracking that somewhere. But let's say it was 100,000, and I'm sure it's many more than that. But let's say it was 100,000. What percentage of them will die? And I'm actually gonna you're gonna set the number, and I'm gonna go over under. So this is where you get to be a bookmaker.
I get to be a bookmaker.
Yeah.
On a number we don't know.
Yeah, isn't this great?
We have no vision into the future. Is more cloudy than it.
Listen. It still benefits the Danny Barker Foundation, right? So there is some good in this game for us.
I would say it's 99%.
Wow. Okay. So I'm gonna go under. I was gonna guess like in the 80s, but you're gonna say, wow, 99%. That's wow. The one thing I will say about that is I do think there's going to be a lot of interesting opportunities emerging from all of it. While we'll see the death of lots of restaurants, we'll see the rebirth and a renaissance of lots better ones with lower cost bases, as an example.
Yeah. No, I agree with this. I think there's going to be a dramatic reorganization of of organization and of the way we work too. I think it's going to change.
Well,
New Orleans has been thriving in the restaurant industry with curbside pickup. So, it's a restaurant town, and remarkably, so many restaurants have been able to survive on takeout. Now, people love to eat in restaurants, and they love it in New Orleans. It's a very culinarily advanced society, civilization, community. So they have great support for the restaurants. But that's working, and that'll probably be something that persists.
Yeah, I prefer that anyway. I broke my foot last year. We didn't go out a ton except on vacation. We're always out, right, when we went in December. I realized I don't like going to most restaurants. The environment at my house is a lot better. It's quiet. I can hear.
Yeah.
And I'm okay losing a little heat or having to reheat something a little bit once I get it home, if the food's tasty enough to begin with. So yeah, I'm with you. So this leads to another good prediction. Within the next 5 years, do you think we'll see, Americans spend an average of 1 day a week working at home, or do you think it'll be higher? I'm going to say it's going to be higher. Yeah, I think it's going to be higher. I don't think we'll get to 3 days, but I do think we'll get to more than one.
Yes. I agree with that. I think there will be some balance. Be a little push and pull, but ultimately I think we'll settle on some flexibility in the work schedule, work from home.
Well, so I also think, decentralization is going to proliferate in startups. I don't know how to take a bet on that, but, it happens now, but it's going to go, it's going to be even more common, right? Like, why do you need to leave your apartment or your house to move forward at all, right? You can do quite a bit.
I wonder if those trends, between this greater decentralization is also furthered by what Vivienne was speaking of earlier, of the distrust in any sort of institutions and central authority, that's kind of grown. That it's because we really are seeing this. She's not mistaken in any way about the progress that's being made against COVID is coming from, all parts, the university systems, independent researchers, the biotech industry. All of those are really the contributors rather than the CDC or the WHO giving us direction, and central governments and even the state governments directing resources. It's been pretty remarkable.
So, and I'm curious, I saw this crazy headline. You must have seen it. BARDA gives $483 million to Moderna for the COVID-19 vaccine.
I know. Why didn't they give it to Steve Reed? They're missing the boat. They're not.
Maybe our dear Steve didn't think big enough and should have applied for, as opposed to $60 million in grants that could be helpful. Maybe he should have applied for $480 million.
Yeah. Well, he did mention Moderna as being sort of advanced in developing the RNA vaccine technology. Yeah. I mean, this has been something people have been looking at since 2010. I hope this is the breakthrough that the RNA model needed to get going.
Well, so the question is, do you think we'll see below or above 70% efficacy rate with Moderna's, we'll call it cure?
70% effectiveness rate. Neil, I really have to beg out of this question. I don't know.
No, we're still benefiting the Danny Barker Foundation. You got to take this bet. Sorry, that's not the way this works.
So I have to say that everyone else in the world who's listening, your prediction is equal to and most probably better than mine. I'll say 70% efficacy, yes.
Okay, so I'm going to say under. So
okay.
So are you going under or above? Because 70 was I said that.
I'm right at 70. I don't know what else to say. I'd say it'll be, yeah. So you're saying below 70?
You're better off with your odds bet to go above or below,
70
not
or
exactly
better.
70. Yeah, 70 or better.
70
Okay,
or
above.
better.
Yeah, I'm trying to help you out here. I was trying not to
Thank you.
dig you
Help
into
me
a
out
corner.
making a blind prediction. I can throw darts too with the blind.
I heard this week from probably one of the best negotiators I know in the VC space that he wouldn't look at startups that were he wouldn't even bother to look. So this is before he starts negotiating, that weren't 50% reduced in price from 4 months ago. So yeah, I mean, just 2 weeks ago, I was telling you I thought it was like 30%. Right. And I'm hearing these different numbers. And, this is a pretty sophisticated angel who's got more than 50 companies in his in his portfolio. And, he's a trader on Wall Street as well, or was. Still trades for his own personal account, or an investor in real estate. So investing across lots of interesting asset classes.
But I think he's probably thinking out, 12 to 18 months from now, and over through this valley, Neil, companies are going to be starved for cash. He can probably, by drawing a line in the sand or something more firm, achieve those kinds of terms, I think.
Yeah, he was saying that he thought he could buy, a quarter of companies more often than he used to for a smaller amount of money, which was interesting, right? Just to think about in general.
I wonder if that creates blind spots, though, right? Because the companies that are discounting themselves the most might attract his eye, but those might
for
not
sure.
Be the best,
yeah,
right?
You've got to look at the entire model for sure. Yeah, but he just said, hey, right now isn't the time for me to invest anyway. So for me to look, it's got to come from a really trusted source, or it's got to come with that kind of price discount where I won't even think about it unless it's already in my portfolio. So I'm looking for a prediction we can try and make, and maybe you can set the prediction, and I can, as opposed to me setting this prediction. I have no real feel, even trying to look at all of the data, where valuations are right now. It's definitely below 30%, but I don't know how bad it is. And I don't think we've seen the worst of the economy yet, clearly. So maybe this doesn't end up being a prediction. Any thoughts about how to even think about where we are, since none of the data is quick enough to reflect what's going on?
Yeah, everything has such a great lag now, and the quality of the data is even suspect. That's the fragile systems and the daisy chain of shutdowns have probably limited our ability to even collect the data in a reasonable way.
Yeah, how much less is the dollar worth? Let's start with that.
How much less?
Yeah, in the last 6 weeks, how much has the dollar fallen in value?
Well, the dollar's been strengthening because it seems, compared to other currencies, as if it's the only game in town. But the corollary to that is, of course, the price of the dollar in gold terms. So gold prices have risen, which really is essentially a falling dollar against hard assets. And traditionally, gold hasn't really a lot of industrial uses, so it's money first and foremost. But against other currencies, the Australian dollar, etc., the Canadian dollar, the U.S. dollar has strengthened against the pound and the euro. But I think that's also very likely it's temporary, because to fund all of the stimulus that we've now authored, they're going to have to be a raft of new bond issuances and tremendous flooding of the markets with dollars. But
the Fed's doing a good job of that everywhere they can, right? Being involved literally everywhere.
Yeah, but people have predicted the death of the dollar for my whole investment career, ever since Nixon especially took us off of the gold Bretton Woods standard in August of 71. So when that window closed and the dollar and other currencies resultingly all became free floating, and they would just trade against each other to find their value, people have been predicting the death of the dollar, and other countries
I'm not suggesting that at all. I'm just saying, how do you start to think about, like, this is you're a value investor. Maybe this is back to the conversation of how do you value a tomato, but do you value a tomato worth less today or worth more today than you did 6 weeks ago?
Well, many methods, right? I think the dollar will weaken. If I'm to make a prediction, I was just saying the death of the dollar has been predicted. That's an extreme, but I do think that the dollar will weaken just because of the flood of dollars we're about to unleash on the world. But there still also is the alternative argument. There's another
currency that God seems to trust in on the printing.
yeah, and that has this sort of military backing and other non-economic attributes that give the dollar its support, right? So,
all right.
Anyway.
Well, I guess we'll end the predictions game with not as many predictions today, and we'll end the show as well.
I think that's good.
The big time stuff that I wish I had. The big time stuff that'll make you mad. The big time stuff. I like the big time stuff. I like the big time stuff that I never had.